Ridiculously Happy Peoplecast. I'm Sophia Lemon, and I have Lauren Best with me today. How's it going, Lauren?
It's going great. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Me too. How long have we known each other now?
A long time, I think. Almost 20 years. Not quite 20 years, though, but it's coming up.
It's got to be close, though, because when I go, 15 years ago, I was in college.
Yeah, so it's definitely more than 15.
Oh yeah,
it's maybe just shy of 20.
That's hilarious. That makes me feel old.
It makes me feel kind of warm and fuzzy, though. Like, it's pretty cool. I mean, I don't even think we would have been surprised in high school if we had told ourselves, oh, one day you'll be, recording a podcast together. I think there's some things that I would have been very surprised about, how, the twists and turns of life, that happens. But I think we might have been like, yeah, that sounds good. Of course.
Yeah, for sure. Although we might have been like, we're going to record a podcast in 20 years. What's a podcast?
Exactly.
Because I had a flip phone in high school.
I think you were the first person I knew maybe with a smartphone.
Yeah, that might have happened. Yep, I was a nerd.
after the flip phone era. After the flip phone era. But,
So, Lauren, why don't you just tell people who you are, what you do, all of the things that you do. Yeah.
So I'm an interdisciplinary creative. Some people say multi-passionate. I mean, we all have multifaceted aspects to our life.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a poet. I'm a musician. I'm a voice coach. I facilitate creative processes in lots of different ways. I've worn different hats over the years, so to speak, and I've worked with different types of people, from music with babies and families when they're just starting out on their creative path, and all the way to people who are seniors, who are reflecting upon what's happened in their life, reflecting upon where they are now through their creativity. I put out my first book of poetry this year. Mm-hmm. I make things and I help other people make things.
That's perfect. That's awesome. And when you and I were talking about having you on the podcast, I'm like, yes, of course. Let's sit down, talk about what we're going to talk about, because I was like, she does so much. What are we going to talk about? And we ended up talking a lot about business, and basically it kind of came down to you're changing a lot in your business right now. And when we were talking, I'm going, I feel like I'm going through a lot of the exact same things as you at exactly the same time. I feel like I'm pivoting in my business a little bit right now as well. So I thought that would be a good place to start. Do you want to sort of catch us up on what you have done throughout the years? Because I know you've been doing all of these creative things for as long as I've known you, and obviously for longer than that. But yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just get into it, honestly.
Yeah, I was thinking, how far back do we want to go? You've known me through so many different eras. So you knew me when I was in high school, and I was doing the singer-songwriter thing, among other creative things, but especially performing as a singer-songwriter, organizing concerts, collaborating with other people. I started making an album of songs I'd written while I was in high school. I started making that album while I was still in high school, and I wasn't done it yet when it was time to. I just assumed I would go to university because that's what I'd already always been told. But then the time came and I was still making this big album of music, and I thought, well, I'd better focus and finish that before I consider what happens next. So I released that in 2011. I didn't end up going to university, but I went to the Royal Conservatory of Music and did the Artist Educator Professional Training Program there, which was using different art forms to achieve different things that weren't necessarily just within that art form. So as it also, of course, honored that, music for the sake of music, art for the sake of art, but we were thinking about how we could go into classrooms and do math through dance, or do science through music, and blending art forms and learning through the arts as opposed to just in the arts, as well as in community and social service. capacities. So, working with people to process grief through digital media, like with a community partner, like a child life specialist or someone who's working in the social service field. So a lot of partnerships. Really exciting time for me to be exploring all these different ways of working with creativity and working with people. And I did some collaborations with cognitive neuroscientists that were developing music education with a focus on developing cognitive skills. So I helped with creating a video game for research purposes that was using music training with seniors. I helped with a related project, but the other end of the lifespan with young children and helping the Royal Conservatory develop a new early childhood curriculum. And then I left the city. So I was doing all these exciting things. I was also teaching early childhood music in other ways. And I was voice coaching all this time as well, because, it's the freelancer juggle. You're doing different things. I was performing music. I was singing with experimental improvising choirs and indie bands. And, life was a rich mosaic of activities, let's say. And I also longed to be more closely connected with nature. The things you hear, right, about, I was living in downtown Toronto, in the heart of the city, traveling all over the city to do this work I was doing. And that was a really amazing way to experience Toronto. But I'd realized after having left Owen Sound how great it actually was, which I didn't fully notice or appreciate as a teenager. And coming back, even just to visit, even in the city, I found I was very drawn to, I was having these amazing experiences with people, but I wanted to have my own experiences with nature. And I was getting away from the city things and going into just the nature things. And I was wanting more of that. And also to be closer to family and have more community. And I realized, wow, where I'm from and where my family still lives is sort of like heaven on earth. Like, it's rough around the edges here and there, but all the things I want to do in my spare time, like hike and swim and just, and to have that connection to land and to place in a different kind of way. I realized it had sort of been there all along, right? And so I could joke and say it was early retirement. Not really, but that's what I wanted to do, right? I didn't want to wait like my whole life to retire somewhere I really wanted to be. I realized, oh, okay, like I thought I needed this city thing, and here I am. This is I actually do want to return to this small town, which I hadn't thought I wanted. So I moved back to Owen Sound. I had my first child, and entering motherhood. I was also going through some big things in my life personally around grief and around, like, it was just there were a lot of transitions happening at once. Not just transitions, but like healing and going through things. And so it was in some ways coming home, right, and in some ways returning to what I knew, but it was also in some ways this totally different experience, especially with where I was at with that. So I ended up starting my business after mat leave. I also became Owen Sound's Poet Laureate around the same time, which was a wonderful, wild experience and took me from considering myself as a songwriter who secretly writes poetry but isn't really a poet and doesn't really publish poetry, but people say the songs are like poetry, but I'm not really a poet. Like, I was never really acknowledged. I was never comfortable like trying to publish, even though I was writing poetry in secret. Yes. But it was always like I only wanted to share that if it was in the form of a song. I wasn't doing poetry readings and things like that. But in my term as Poet Laureate, I fully embraced being a poet. I realized how much I had actually kind of cut myself off from the potential in poetry. I mean, it's vulnerable. It's a thing. You gotta like give yourself some space for poetry.
We're taking a quick break, and while we do, I have a favor to ask you. Would you please take just a couple of moments to leave us a rating and a review in your podcast app of choice? Your feedback really goes a long way in helping us reach new people and also improve the podcast. So thanks very much. And we're back to the show.
And so my term as poet laureate taught me so much. I was doing a lot of the focus of the tenure was on children, so I was doing classroom visits and workshops in the community, and that was really exciting. And then at the same time, I was also building this business, Best Practice Arts. Like I was saying, I'd freelanced for a long time, but a lot of that was in partnership with organizations. So with Best Practice Arts, I was still partnering with organizations pretty frequently. I still do that. But I was also offering some direct programming. So I was offering early childhood programming. I did a drop-in at a local cafe where the babies and toddlers and their parents, where we jam and sing together. And my own child was young, so, he'd come along with a grandparent, and I was like really digging into being part of the community, which was really exciting and in a different way. Whereas in the city, when I'd lived in Toronto, I'd facilitated early childhood music groups, but I wasn't a part of the community where I was facilitating. I was coming into a community and leading classes. And I mean, you get to know people, but it's a different thing than doing these, like activating this kind of within my hometown and with my actual child. And teaching one-to-one music lessons, facilitating groups as well. And from an entrepreneurship perspective, it was a bit of the familiar tale of being everything to everyone, which
for sure.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially creative entrepreneurs, because I'd be curious if you share this experience, but I think as a creative entrepreneur, like people talk to you with obvious doubt sometimes. Like people kind of imply through talking to you that like you should sort of take what you can get. I think this is changing, but especially before there was so much online and people are understanding niche marketing more. There's this sort of this attitude of like, well, I guess you're on it for the money. Like kind of take what you can get. It's so wonderful. You're making such a difference. That's so noble. Like, and it becomes this weird like praising your like moral aptitude, especially with community work. It may be a bit different with photography when it's not like it's more with say like individual events or moments. Like what do you think? Have you noticed that?
It's like an individual basis. There's definitely a huge segment of the population that looks at like creative fields like mine, where it's like, well, I mean, this is going to be good for your portfolio, so I shouldn't have to pay you. Like, what? Yeah. No, I've definitely experienced that. That is for sure. I would imagine that it would be more so in your case. Like, oh, you must be doing it for the love of it. So there's no monetary value to that. You just love doing it. Why would I need to pay you? Yeah, for sure. Horribly irritating things when you're in business in a creative field.
Well, and I think especially with poetry and to some extent with music too. And I mean, that was not necessarily the root cause of how I was trying to be everything to everyone. That was, maybe influenced that in terms of my perception of how I built and how I created my life, but also my business. But also I was really excited to partner and serve and help people in all these different ways, and to like kind of flex my work muscles that I developed over all of these years, and to just like bring it to my community. And so it's not like I'm not saying, oh, woe is me, like they just made me stretch myself thin because they didn't believe in me. It's not that at all. It's like I was very much choosing that, but over time I was realizing that it was not sustainable, it was not efficient, and it took some time to realize that. And also in that time, I'm very grateful that I've been able to participate in some of the cool projects I've been able to do. There's lots. I'm very grateful for that time. Definitely wouldn't take it back. But I did start to see that I needed to shift and make a change. And I was co-musical director at a church, so I was leading church choir and accompanying, and like I said, I was also working on this very individual level with people, and so it was I was starting to think, okay, where is my business going? Where am I going? And like, how am I really making a difference and making an impact? Because I could tell I'm making a difference in a lot of different ways, but I'm thinking, okay, is it time to be strategic about this? Is it time to, you know, and this wasn't like a quick, oh, okay, now I know, you know, my calling, or like, now I know what I need to do. Because everything I was doing was valid in some ways. Everything I was doing, like, brought me some sparkle and warmed my heart and helped pay the bills, and it all, you know, it was all coming together. So it was a little tough to think, like, in 10 years, if I keep doing this thing, where's that going to lead? If I do more of this, where's that going to lead? How many people do I reach? How deeply do I reach them? Like, how am I building community? You know, I'm considering these questions. And then it was 2020. And I took my one-to-one practice online. So I was teaching piano, voice, ukulele online. I was also still facilitating groups online as well. And I realized, wow, I can keep having an online business. I hadn't considered it before. With the business model I had, I hadn't thought whether it could fit into that, and I realized it could. And I realized that there were lots of advantages to being online, not just for myself, and the people I could reach, but also for the people I was reaching for accessibility. Geographically, especially in a rural area, right? I was really excited to think, I know what it's like to drive between different small towns in the winter, going from one thing to another, because I've been doing it. And so I know if I'm doing that and I'm the person doing the work for the person who's attending a music class or who's participating in a creative project, like, it's almost even more investment for them to travel. And I was, you know, teaching children and who had siblings, and I was thinking, I'm a parent. Like, I know what it's like to have to drive your kid somewhere and to, you know, to do that juggle. And so I saw the benefits for myself and for my business, but also for the people I was reaching. And not that online learning needs to be for everyone all the time, but I saw a lot of potential for families I was reaching that I definitely would not have reached otherwise. That I was starting to reach people who were further away, or, you know, or just because of the circumstances. Like, I could tell it worked. And then in this process, I was also really excited about how through this I was innovating the way I was teaching. So because I was using different technologies, I was using Zoom for a while, but I also used something called Musi that had more music specific options, more whiteboarding and recording, and you know, you could have a piano on the screen you could show, and things like that. And so through the technology, there were also new creative activities that were emerging. So I was teaching one-to-one online for a bit. Doing groups online, I realized, okay, these one-to-one lessons, like, let's take that into group format, because I know we learn so much from seeing one another's creative process and from seeing one another's example. So I went from teaching one-to-one lessons online to doing groups with kids online and really digging into some of the creative collaboration they could do. So I was building up. Well, I decided, like, okay, I'm going to test this. Like, I'm going to test this group program, see how it goes. So I tested that for a year with mixed age groups, but same instruments. And then the second year, I transitioned that to mixed age and mixed instrument. Because I knew it was possible. I knew that having tested tested how I was, the format for a year, I knew it would work with mixed instrument, and I knew it would provide, like, cool opportunities for the kids to learn from sometimes they would be same instruments and they learn from that too, but to learn from the contrast as well, and to duet together, to have musical conversations together online between kids that are of different musical abilities and different instruments, and they're able to go back and forth and have a musical conversation where they're listening to each other and they're developing ideas together through the music. And that was really important to me because I don't think I was given the opportunity to have a musical conversation with another child, maybe ever in childhood in a facilitated context. Like, I would do that with friends anyways. I did duets on piano with other kids, but I'm not sure if anyone ever put me together with another child and actually like encourage that back and forth improvisation in a music education setting. And what I also saw was that by doing that, they were expressing far beyond what you would have thought their abilities were in a like to prepare for a performance. They were able to do things musically that were so cool and so different than what they would have done if I had been just having them practice to perform something that is the same every time, by opening that up. So this brings us to 2023 was the second year I was doing that pilot. I decided to not continue with those groups because I decided that I wanted to shift the focus of my practice to working with adults. I'd been working with all different ages, and I thought, oh, okay, like it's creative music. It's for all ages. Like that's the thing. I realized, however, that it was sort of becoming two different businesses. It was sort of becoming a business for children and families and a business for adults. And even within the focus for adults, I was doing some professional development work. And so even within working with adults, there's this question in my mind of, okay, is it music? Am I just giving music to people? Because that's not the business I started, but like maybe that's what it's become. But I felt both personally inspired and from what I was seeing in the conversations I was having with people that it was more than that I could really help people in their professional development. I could help them with their personal development in ways that extended beyond their musicality or their music practice. I was having conversations with people about the creative projects they wanted to do, about, you know, the book they wanted to write. And I'm a podcaster. I started podcasting in 2022 with a podcast partner from Seattle, and our podcast is called the Infinite Improvisation Podcast. And so I'd be talking to people about that too, and I was seeing the difference that was making and how I was able to reach people in a really geographically wide area, but with really similar interests and connect pretty deeply, pretty quickly through that format. So I decided to wind down the music lesson young person focused part of my business. So the program I developed over that 2-year trial, I actually worked with the Canadian New Music Network to write a description of that with a ton of activities to have as an online resource. So that lives in the Canadian New Music Network's participatory music hub. So that was cool because I thought, oh, I'm developing this program to run it for the rest of my life. Or maybe not actually for the rest of my life, but like to really roll out in my business in a more like, as talk about scaling, right, to grow it more. But I was really happy that investment in developing that, I was then able to, you know, write and kind of package as this simple but super jam-packed resource and send that out into the world so that other people might benefit from that or might be able to draw upon that and develop that for their own programs. Particularly because of the mixed instrument and to reach kids who are in, or people, it can be used for adults too, to reach people who are more rural and remote. I'm still excited about that program in terms of what someone else might do to run with it and to use it. Even a non-musician, I wrote the activities, hoping that even someone who didn't consider themselves a music teacher or a professional musician or, maybe even an educator, but someone who had some facilitation skill, could, I don't know if they would want to implement the whole program, but that they could at least find things that were useful and that they could bring to their professional practice. And honestly, bring to their personal practice. Most of the activities are for groups, but a lot of those activities are also great for an individual exploring. So as I was transitioning, I was focusing more and more on voice coaching, which I'd always done. Even in those group classes, I was doing voice lessons within that group context. In some cases, I've been choir directing. I've been facilitating improvised music and improvisation. And the voice is so powerful as a tool for creativity and for improvising, especially because it's our improvisation skills are pre-verbal, right? Like our vocal skills, we can express with our voice before we learn how to talk. As soon as we're born, we get our needs met with our voice, right? And like you can have a conversation with a toddler where they're really expressive with their voice and they're communicating things and you understand them, even though they're not using words. And I found that through facilitating activities with people or having conversations with people even where I'd indicate that they didn't necessarily need to go down the path of studying music to feel liberated and empowered and capable to explore their voice and to access those benefits for their wellness, for their health, for their mood and their mental state. So both on a physiological level and I mean, it's all interconnected, right? So that on mind, body, spirit level, they could get where they wanted to go. And it didn't have to be about a performance on a stage, or it didn't have to be about learning a specific song exactly so that we can sing it in a choir and all do the exact same thing. Or it didn't have to be about learning a specific genre even, or a specific style. And it can be, like, all those things can be very rewarding and can teach us lots and can have lots of the same benefits. But I realized that I was able to shift things really quickly for people, where in just a workshop, in a group, or in just a, like I said, in just a conversation. Because the other thing about being a voice coach is that the more I was emphasizing that and telling people about that, the more I was getting strong reactions from people where they would tell me about a traumatic experience they had where someone criticized their voice as a very young person and that this was still on their heart and mind, or people would even like say like, oh, well, I'm not a singer. I can't sing. You wouldn't want to hear me sing. And I'm thinking, this is not, like, singing is not juggling. Singing is not like as complicated as some of these other skills that, like, playing piano, you do need to, even playing piano, you can actually improvise pretty powerfully. But compared to singing, right? Singing, you can mimic a lot of what you hear and get some pretty impressive results with, like, no previous experience, no previous skill. Even at a really young age, you can often get kids to do that versus mimicking something on piano, right? Or mimicking a blast off sequence on a rocket ship. Like, those are not as innate, right? And so I was starting to feel like I was on this, I'm not sure if crusade would be the right word, but I was finding even in conversations with people who I wasn't actually working with, that there were misconceptions that we could adjust really quickly, or that or sometimes I wouldn't have a conversation where those misconceptions were adjusted, right? I would just listen, but I would think to myself, oh my goodness, I wish this person would come see me and sing with me a bit, because and we can take the word sing out of it. Come make some sounds with their body, with their voice with me, right? Even if it's not leading to singing a song in a particular style, right? Because I knew how much I could help people who clearly had this anxiety around their voice, or this discomfort, or I might even say shame. I mean, that's what people were saying. And I knew I could help those people so quickly if I was invited to, right? But just like a doctor can't go to a networking event and start giving medical advice, like, I also there's only so far I felt like professionally appropriate and personally and tactfully appropriate to take those conversations. But it was emboldening me more and more to, preach the good gospel of what we can do with our voice, right? Like, to say what's possible, and not only to say what's possible, but to show what's possible. Because hearing this from people, as my focus became more and more on the voice, which also has to do with the fact that we all have a voice and we don't need to buy anything to use our voice. Whereas having taught piano for a long time, like, you need to get an instrument. You can actually learn a fair bit on piano with apps now, which is pretty amazing. But like, it still requires technology. But like, our voices are the technology. Music is a technology. Music is a human psychotechnology that we're using. That, like, this is what we've done to help ourselves. This is like, we have built our world this way, right? But now we've, in my view, we've actually diminished the role that music can play, and that I think I see a lot of parallels between music and movement. Because voice work is movement. Voice is a movement practice. It's through, I hope I get this right scientifically, but like, there's like what they call contamination between the different brain regions, between expression, speech, like language, and movement. So when we dance, it's related to the language parts in our brain as well. We're actually in a sense, we're speaking with our body when we dance. And our vocal abilities, even before we had language, we had vocal mimicry. So we share vocal mimicry with hummingbirds, not with chickens, there are primates that don't have vocal mimicry abilities, but we do, and we share that with some birds. And birds that do have vocal mimicry abilities are the same species that can dance and that can mimic dance, and they also have larger brains. And so there's this potential in our voice that I was seeing was not recognized, and also not recognized professionally. So I love talking to other entrepreneurs, other creatives. Sometimes there are folks also who, I've heard the term intrapreneur, like they wouldn't consider themselves an entrepreneur or business owner, or maybe even a creative, but they are doing things, they are initiating positive change in the world and working with people, perhaps still within an employment role, but they're in the same category. And I was noticing, both for myself and for others, that our actual voices are often pretty ignored, even though we want our voice to show up for us every day so that we can, speak to clients or customers. Like most people who have a business are using their voice for connecting with partners or selling or providing the service they provide. Like, the voice is usually really central, and often people have done almost nothing to connect with their voices. Or, of course, like, I've also done theater work in the past. Some people have done, speech classes of some kind, like a debate club or Toastmasters or that kind of thing. Or sometimes people have done singing lessons, or sometimes people sing in a choir. But I was noticing that what I wasn't hearing from people was that they continued to see their voice as central. Like, I see the voice as an intersection between all these different parts of our lives, the professional and the personal. And I know that we can kind of start at the voice, and it can be a jumping off point to, for whatever we need, right? Like, some people need to reduce anxiety and get in a much more harmonious, coherent, physiological state in order to do what they want to do, right? To present, to make a cold call, whatever, right? And we can start with our voices and physiologically get there the way we want. I have also noticed how amazing the voice can be as to increase our awareness about not only our body. So it's amazing for increasing proprioceptive awareness, interoceptive awareness, the types of things that, to loop back, that we do movement exercises for, right? I think movement is being seen now as so much more important, and not just for athletes, right? And so it's kind of like how movement is too important to reduce to something for athletes. Similarly, I think voice work is too important to reduce to something for singers, for musicians, for professional speakers, for presenters, to view it as separate. And so what I was saying is, I was noticing that people were growing in their mindset and in their ability to navigate their creative processes, and to think about challenges in different ways, right? So like the voice work becomes, it could be a pressure cooker or it could be a playground, right? But sort of like how, if you commit to a movement goal of some kind, that movement goal is probably going to teach you things that are not about what you do in the end, the race you run or the goal you hit of whatever that is, right? You're going to learn a lot about how you think, about how your body works, about how you relate to challenges, and the growth along the way is going to be this emergent process. So as you can see, my passion for voice work just has been growing and growing and growing. And I've been podcasting myself. When I was talking to people about voice work, I would notice people would still be scared about the singing part. And they'd often say, oh, well, do you work with speakers too? Do you do speaking things? And I would say yes. And I've definitely done lots of exploration with the voice in non-musical contexts as well, facilitating theater and writing and other kinds of things. I'm a performance poet as well. And what's also been happening in this story is that I've been performing poetry through this time, right? And I released my book this year, so I was performing poetry from it and combining that with music, and so bringing in those speech performance elements even more. And what this has all kind of come together to now is, and feel free to jump in and ask questions, because I, of course, skipped some parts in there. But what this has all come together to is voice coaching to help podcasters and to help people who are podcasting to, why are we podcasting? Why are we here, right? It's to make a difference. And I know podcasting is powerful for expanding our difference, right? Our positive change, expanding it in terms of who we're reaching, but also like the way we can impact people, not only because we can impact a greater number of people, but also because they can re-listen to the podcast, they can pause it, they can take notes, they can send it to their friend, they can listen to it, not necessarily in a workshop where they have other things on their mind. Maybe they didn't absorb it all that day. Like, they can take it with them into these really intimate, focused moments. And that podcasting, as I was saying, I love talking to entrepreneurs and helping out other entrepreneurs because I've had to learn a lot on my journey. And that it's an amazing business tool. It helps people, grow the impact they're having through their business as well, not only through their message, but through their business model and through how their business makes magic in the world. So I saw this opportunity. I thought about it for a long time, actually, and it just didn't. Once I thought, oh, I'll just actually tell them that I'm here for them, the people podcasting, because before that I thought, oh, I'm hearing these podcasters. I'd be listening to a podcast and I think, I wish that person would come talk to me. I know I could help them. Or I'd hear like a big podcaster who's showing up and talking to millions of people disparage their own singing voice and act as if singing was this insurmountable idea, as if it was something that was, as if attempting to sing would be the same as attempting to like star in a ballet performance next month, which if they want to try some ballet, all the power to them. But like, as I was saying, singing is inherently like, can have some very like intuitive and innate aspects. Is a very different thing. And so I was really shocked actually at hearing these people who I respected and admired and who frankly were inspiring me, who were like, they have a bigger audience, they're more educated, they're more powerful in many ways. I mean, we can argue that, I guess. I'm not gonna put shade on my own light, but you know what I'm saying. Like, objectively speaking, they are reaching way more people than me. And I'm thinking, oh no, don't say that about your own voice. Like, if you are setting the example for millions of people that you are cut off from your voice, but yet you are saying that people should be doing all these things to improve their mental health and improve their physical health and make a difference in the world, but yet you, as an offhand comment, you're talking about not having access to your own singing voice, which, like, you were born screaming just like me. Trust me, like, you have a voice that you can access as well. And just like I had, and I was learning things for my own health and healing journey, both, on all levels, on mind, body, spirit levels, I was being changed by these podcasts. And I was also thinking, I could help them, like, let me at them and, like, give me 5 minutes and let's do some singing. And I think, like, we can change things for them, because I've seen it happen so many times where people who have way less to benefit, like way less benefit to gain. I mean, it's arguable, right? But like people who feel like things can totally change for them, from not feeling experienced and comfortable singing to feeling way more playful and confident, and or I like to say courageous or brave sometimes instead of confident. And way more able to explore, kind of like having a window that you like pull back the curtain from, or that you wipe off the fog from, and then you're able to perceive possibilities in a new way. So this had been brewing in me for a while and adding to my passion about voice work, but it occurred to me, like, okay, I can help people in their podcasting feel better about what they're doing, because actually that specific example I gave, this podcaster was actually talking about doing voice warm-ups for podcasting, just didn't feel able to explore music, even though he was literally actually using music as part of his warm-up. He just wasn't like owning it. He was literally using some of the types of things I would suggest, like, listening and speaking or singing lyrics. And it was helping him already, was the crazy thing. But yet he would also make these comments as if it wasn't, like, as if that wasn't legit, or as if he wasn't actually able to explore singing, despite the fact that he was almost doing it. Yeah. So voice work, whether that's singing or just sound making, it can help us get ready for what we're making. It can help us both in terms of building our skills prior to recording, or prior to starting a podcast, or, people who already have a podcast to improve their craft, right? To build their sound or their tone or their delivery. That could be clarity, that could be flow, that could be expressiveness, but to get it to where they want to be. It also has to do, though, with just feeling the way you want to feel. Like, you can sound great, but if you feel nervous, and if your mindset and if your like skill set, your strategies aren't there for you, because you don't believe they're there for you. Like, I want people to enjoy making the difference they want to make, because then they're going to make that difference more effectively and more sustainably too. Sometimes also you can be enjoying it, but it could still be more effective, right? So for some people, it's about improving their ability to connect with people, right? And there can be a bunch of different aspects of that. And sometimes that is in working with the message, right? Like the creative voice inside of us, the inner workings of our voice in terms of both how we talk to ourselves, but also how we sort of pre-generate the energy or thoughts or feelings or ideas that we're then putting out into the world. Sometimes it's about like some of those really physical aspects of kind of leading with the body, really exploring with the body, and then using that to support, like I was saying, improving our clarity or flow or ability to connect with people. Specifically, music improvisation, so singing a song to yourself, just like imagining the song and singing to yourself, or even literally just imagining it without singing, helps put us in a creative flow state. And so the other thing about podcasting is that it's a different kind of demand on the voice as an instrument and on the creator than other kinds of content creation. So both in the sense that podcasters are often self-producing, or even if they're not self-producing, they have a lot of creative input. So part of that is a creative strategy question, like how do you relate to the creative process and how do we navigate that? But also it tends to be longer form, not always, but a lot of the time, right? So we're using our voice more. We need stamina. We need to, we want our voice to show up the way we want it to, right? Whether that is in terms of comfort level and like the resilience of our voice, or whether that's in terms of having high vibes, right? Like being, I talked earlier about like calming down our nervous system with our voice, helping regulate, but it can also be that we need to wake up a bit. It can be that we need to like remember and wake up to like our essence, so to speak, but it can also literally be we need a bit more energy. We want to vocally have a bit more expression so that people can connect with it more easily. And then there's also the idea of like once we are doing that, oh, and we're talking to other people. So conversationally, there's an improvisation element. So that's very supportive, right? Podcasting. Sometimes it can be scripted, and that's a thing to explore, but also relating to the guest and what's happening for their voice and with their sound is another thing that we can improve and work on. And then of course afterwards, how do we share it? How do we design our process and our sharing that after we've stopped the recording, what happens next? And how are we kind of directing that energy, both on a technical editing, creative choices, creative process level, but also in terms of like our impact and our message in the world. And I have a new podcast coming out too. So it's also like this has also been a very personal journey. And as I was saying, I'm sure I skipped lots of different parts of where I got to where I am today, but a big part of it has been that I haven't always been comfortable with my own voice. Even after having had things that most people would think are like evidence of success, like, oh, of course you wouldn't get nervous because you've already used your voice in this context or that context, right? Like, I was doing all kinds of things that I found really intimidating when I was first building my career, but I was doing them anyways. And I see how I could have had even more tools. I had some great support and some great mentors, don't get me wrong, but how I could have been even more comfortable, confident, just well-equipped to work with my own voice. And as a singer, like I was singing professionally, I've been doing concerts and things like that for a long time. And I was, I had the willingness to get up on a stage and be vulnerable in front of people and share, but that didn't necessarily mean that I always, felt 100% about what I was doing. And I had a lot of vocal work to do of my own. Like I went to a voice doctor and muscle tension dysphonia, and I worked with different voice coaches, and I, had my tonsils and adenoids removed in high school, and had like sickness that was surrounding my use of my voice, right? When you're using your voice in really demanding ways professionally, you hear people losing their voice, right? I was demanding a lot of my voice. I wanted my voice to just perform for me whenever I wanted it to, whether that was on a mic, on stage. I didn't want to have to dislike parts of what I was doing, right? Like I didn't totally have a willingness to confront some of that, right? I wanted my voice to show up every day as I was facilitating and teaching, like sometimes hundreds of people in a week. I was really pushing myself a lot. There were times where I would just go ahead and book things like 7 days all 7 days of the week, and then do it again the next week and not give myself vocal rest. I was doing things that I knew weren't a good idea, but I was doing them anyways because for lots of reasons. I mean, we can unpack that. I felt like I needed to. And so even knowing all those things, I felt a disconnect from my own voice. Since having kids, my relationship with my voice has changed. I've gone through some really physical things with my voice, with myofunctional therapy, but I've also gone through things with my relationship with my voice that have less to do with how my voice actually sounds, and have a lot more to do with how I'm relating to not only my voice itself and to like that final moment of creative connection, but to the development of that, to my own creative practices, to my own voice practices. And so it's been a complicated journey for me. There's been a lot there, and it's definitely gotten better over time. And it's definitely those challenges I've had which also sometimes didn't even have to do with my voice. It had to do with the fact that I was grieving. Life was hard. It was hard to recognize that at the time, you know, and that impacts how our voices, right? Like that, I wasn't, I needed to look at things for my whole life, even not just my voice. But through all those twists and turns and and journeys, both vocal journeys and personal development journeys and artistic or creative development in other ways, I've learned a lot. And I hope that most other people don't have to necessarily take as long to learn some of those things. But I've developed a lot of tools, I have quite the toolkit, so to speak. So I'm at a point now where it's really exciting to be able to share that with other people and make a difference for people so that they can then make a difference with their voice.
The thing that really stuck out to me that you said is people saying, you know, I can't sing, which is like, well, I guess you can't or don't sing to the standards that What's His Nuts from American Idol expects, and Simon Cowell, wherever he is now. But you literally can sing, just maybe you don't want to get up on stage and get paid for it.
Well, I think of it like dancing too, you know, like I haven't always felt comfortable dancing. I have been laughed at for my dancing, for sure. That has definitely happened. Like both as a young child or as a medium child, I've definitely done some wacky things with my body that got laughed at. You know, I've explored dance in really structured ways. I've explored dance in really unstructured ways, but like I have had some hangups around that. That's been difficult to feel comfortable sharing that. Like I do, even to this day. I think I might get laughed at. I've had family members be possibly slightly embarrassed to be around me at times because of my level of enthusiasm dancing. But like I've come to a new place with it, right? Where I believe that if I wanted to put energy into it, I could get to, you know, take that dancing and share it in some way if I wanted to. But I also realize that the benefits that I get from dancing, what I get to receive from that, is far beyond how it actually even, like, doesn't, other people aren't really involved in that. I can dance totally alone and receive so many of those benefits. I can dance, you know, I've danced in public where I'm rocking out, I'm really enjoying myself, I've let go of these demons from the past. And someone has said, like, wow, way to go. Like, I love that. That's inspiring. Someone's into it, right? Someone else might think it's ridiculous or uncouth or otherwise have a problem with it. And that's okay. That's okay, too. And with singing, I think sometimes we want to sing without the risk that anyone will have an opinion about it. And I think this happens with our voice in terms of even what we say, right? Like, we want to speak our heart and we want to be authentic, but we also don't want to have any risk involved of being misunderstood or being criticized. I mean, I've done so much to help people prepare for performance, and that is also something I love. Like, I come from a performance background. I clearly love sharing with an audience. I love sharing with other performers what that is like. And I love helping people get ready for that moment. Don't get me wrong. But it's way beyond that. And our culture has shifted that we don't have as many community singing opportunities. We don't sing together in the same ways on a regular basis like we used to. Through childhood, there's not as much singing. And our voices aren't becoming less important. I think they're becoming more important, but we're less equipped to, and less trained, actually, like through our education, to actually use our voices and actually access the potential of our voices. Whether that's for professional reasons or whether that is for like deeply personal reasons, because we just want to sing and have a transcendent or mildly amusing experience, you know?
That's a lot to carry with you too, you know, this belief for your whole life that you can't sing, right? And you just avoid doing that forever. Certainly in front of people. I rock out pretty well in my car. anyone in the Tim Hortons drive-through can probably hear me.
They're singing along on the headsets when they
Maybe.
take your order. You could sing your order and see what happens. Maybe they'll sing it back.
I probably won't.
People have talked to me who are seniors, and they are talking about a musical experience they had in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And they have said all this time it has like changed how they relate to what they view as their musical potential, or what they think of their voice, or what they think of how they can connect with people and share with people. I mean, that can be sharing, but ultimately it's about our ability to connect with other people. And that is really integral. Yeah.
This makes me think about laughter, and specifically about this man in the Collingwood area. And I don't know if you spend much time in Collingwood, but there's this man in Collingwood named Casey. And Casey, I'm not positive what he is living with, but he is in a wheelchair. He's nonverbal. And when you see him out and about, he's usually with someone. And I'll see him at Starbucks. And yeah, he doesn't say much, but damn, does that guy have like a recognizable laugh. Like he starts going and the whole room's like, what is going on? He just lets it go. He just goes with it. And I like, how often have you heard from someone, I don't like my laugh? Like this involuntary sound that your body makes when you're really, really happy. You don't like what you sound like when you're really, really happy. That's a terrible thing to live with. Like,
yeah, I guess, I mean, you come up against people, or not up against, up with perhaps, like you're working with people's sense of comfort or discomfort with themselves and how they view themselves all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I would probably say that people are more self-conscious about their voice than about photos, but it's definitely something that I see with photography. Like people tell me all the time, I'm not photogenic. And I'm like, no, someone told you once that you weren't photogenic. There's a difference. Their opinion doesn't matter. So, but like using your voice for things, it can be just a vulnerable thing for people. And maybe because they know they can keep it to themselves, they don't have to share it. Whereas like your family's probably not going to make you go and like sing Christmas carols with them, like go door to door, like probably not going to happen. But like you are probably going to have to stand in a photo with your family every once in a while. So like they'll like bear it, but yeah, it's pretty entertaining. But yeah, very similar.
Well, I wonder about a connection. Do you tell people to like act naturally, or like don't worry about the camera, or just you know, pretend it's not there? Or is that not helpful and people should have a bit of awareness, but then they should chill out?
I don't think that telling people don't worry about it, pretend like the camera's not here, I think that just has no impact. I don't think that most people can really let it go that there's a camera in their face. But there is a lot to like just distracting them and like just if I have a personal branding session in my studio, we spend the vast majority of that time just talking. Like I just ask them questions about random stuff, and like I'll take a photo and then we'll talk about a bunch of stuff, and then I'll take a photo and we'll talk about a bunch of stuff. And that seems to help people relax a little bit, especially with personal branding, just because it's just you, one person in front of the camera. And you can tell, like the first photo, they'll be like, like you can see it in their face. And then the last one, it'll be like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm chill. Yeah. I'm relaxed.
Yeah. So like I can relate to that because I've been stepping on stage for well over 20 years, right? And I'm willing to get up and be seen, my whole body live as I am, you know? But then in a photo, it's different because it's like a single moment, right?
Yeah.
And so even though there's this willingness, there's also like this disconnect where I still come up against that discomfort sometimes. Less now because I've worked on it, but there were times where I thought I was really cool and confident, and then put me in a photo session and I am squirming. And I've also had the experience where people take candid photos, or they're like, oh, just like pretend the camera's not there, act naturally, whatever, right? I'm like, I have a face that moves a lot. Like my big mouth has lots of shapes and those don't always, it's not that I'm like, oh, I look bad. I'm like, that's a weird expression because you told me not to have a normal, like not to worry about it. And so now I'm making all my expressions. And so the reason this feels like it connects for me is because I think with sound making, we can sometimes have like a similar experience where like making sounds and exploring is not the same thing. Just like, you know, all my facial expressions on stage or in this conversation or, you know, making funny faces with my kid is not the same as my faces to be captured in a single moment. You know, and all of our vocal explorations are not necessarily the same as when we're preparing something and preparing so extensively and preparing probably like for years before that for one specific thing that's in one specific style that is this like very specific contextualized thing.
Hi, I'm Becky Waples, the host of the Small Towns Big Dreams podcast. The podcast that celebrates small town creators and shares their stories. From their background to where they found their courage, from their challenges to their wins, from where they found their inspiration to how they took their first step. Join us each week to hear how each guest turned their big dreams into reality. If you are a creator, an entrepreneur, or love someone who is, subscribe now to the Small Towns Big Dreams podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and let's grow together.
And particularly for our voices, so not only is that there's this disconnect because we are judging our voices compared to a highly prepared performance often when we're singing like just to a friend or like in these either preparatory moments or just offhand moments. Not to mention that the music we listen to is highly processed. So compared to 100 years ago, where most of the singing you are hearing is acoustic, most of the singing you're hearing is from people you know around you, like you're absorbing that from people in a different way. I mean, even if you're hearing lots of other sounds, like you're not hearing auto-tune singing, or it's not aside from auto-tune, you're not hearing tons of compression and tons of reverb and close mic technique, as you can hear from how my voice sounds different now, is a different thing than singing for someone else who's just in the room, or singing with a guitar, or maybe you do get up on that mic, but you haven't been practicing on a mic. You know, there's all these there's all these specifics, but not only that, the thing with our voices is that we don't hear it the way other people do, because we're hearing our voices partially through bone conduction, and bone conduction slows down the vibrations, and so we hear our voices differently through our bones than other people are hearing them. We also don't actually hear our own voice while we're speaking in the same way, because our brain partially ignores it so that we're not distracted by processing our own voice. So like we have this experience of our voice, of our inner voice, like some people don't have an inner monologue, but like whatever we feel is generative inside, or our inner self-talk, or our you're telling yourself, don't forget the Kleenex box. That's what you came upstairs for. Like we have our ways of speaking to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And then we have what we imagine our voice sounds like. And then we have what we think we hear when we are speaking, right? And then if we listen to a recording, like it's the classic, oh, I don't like the way I sound on my voicemail, right? Yeah. Because I mean, it's a recording that is sounding different. It's also like a recording that is emphasizing certain frequencies because it's a phone, and then aside from that, even if you and I are sitting together, both listening to my recorded voice, and I'm having all kinds of cringe and you're not, like we are also just having different experiences of it, even hearing the same thing, right? So I think the voice often, like we want... Oh, and this is the other thing, is that singing feels great. Like, it can be, some people feel uncomfortable at times, it can be nervous making, right? But making lots of sounds with your voice is really rewarding. Like, it's an effort for our body, so it's rewarding like exercise. It's vibrating all kinds of cool stuff. It's actually, our thyroid is very close to our voice. Like, we're vibrating all those places that are releasing the good hormonal juices to get our neurochemistry vibing where we want to be. And so when we sing, the experience of singing can't really be replicated in a recording, right? So even if you like your voice and you like the way it sounds, it's going to be a bit of a disappointing experience compared, because it's not how you, when you feel that and you're vibrating and you're, and you're really doing it, that's a different thing, right? I imagine athletes, when they're in the game, feel one thing, and I imagine when they're watching the slow-mo replay, that's a whole other thing. And that doesn't, and unfortunately with our voices, I think that can then become like, oh, I must not like my voice. Oh, like, I'm not as good as I think I am. Oh, like, that person that told me that my voice was annoying, well, my voice doesn't sound like I thought it did. It doesn't sound as good as it felt. So that's evidence that I don't even know how my own voice sounds. Like, can I even trust my own voice if that person also said it didn't sound good? And a lot, sometimes we have an amazing experience singing, and it maybe doesn't sound as good as it could for a particular performance goal, right? And that's okay. Like, that's part of the learning process. I know there are some athletic endeavors I attempted as a child where I thought I was doing amazingly. I felt fantastic. I felt like I was graceful. I actually have a specific story. I will tell you. I was running towards my mother's house down the sidewalk, and they're sitting, in the covered porch watching me run. And I am like I was not a running child, but in that moment, I was like, the sun is shining, my feet are slapping the sidewalk, and I'm like, look at me go. Like, I feel fast, and I'm like, wow, I can feel the wind, like flying by me. Like I must be really like doing it, because I can feel that wind. But it turns out that I could feel the wind because I was like allowing my legs to like fly out to the sides as I was running, because that felt really rewarding and really fun. And like, I wasn't trying to run with proper technique to win a race. I was like, this feels amazing. Like, my legs have never moved like this. And I was told that I looked like I was like a bird trying to take off, or like a pterodactyl or something, because I was just like all limbs flying everywhere. And it felt wonderful. Like, it felt so good. But I've learned that, like, if I want to run more of a distance, and if I want to run for exercise purposes, or even if maybe I'll still run that way sometimes just to get that feeling again. But if I want to run and not have, like, I can run like crazy and get some weird looks, but like, there are a whole bunch of compelling reasons for me to not run like that. And it was an amazing experience, but I may still adjust my running or run that way for fun on sometimes. Maybe we'll have to film a clip of this now.
I was gonna say, if you're watching the video, you can already see how physically expressive Lauren is. So,
but like, if I'm running and I want to go a distance, I have to like really focus on not overdoing it. Like, 'cause I'm not an experienced runner. I'm not a natural at it. I've been practicing running. People who are great singers have usually been practicing singing their whole lives. They are experienced singers. And I noticed that we want our voices to just make miracles for us, which they do, right? But that honing of skill, like, it can be tough. It can be cringy. It can be disappointing. And it doesn't have to be that hard. But if we're trying to do something that is a new skill that's stretching us a bit, that is, that's one of the things that's kind of cool about speech and working in that way, is we can totally explore, and that can really help us, but we aren't trying to use specific singing techniques in a performance. Like, we're then returning to this to speaking, which is a more for many people is a more comfortable thing. So that I'm enjoying that these days. I love, like, I still prepare for performance. I still love helping with that. But there's something pretty cool about doing all this exploration of our voices and being able to use that with, like, and use the benefits of singing, use the benefits of really exploring, like, quite a wide range of dimension in our voices, and capacities we have, both as an instrument and in terms of, like, expressing emotion and concepts and ideas. And then not to worry about it sounding like another singer or sounding like a particular genre or whatever, then to take all that yummy stuff and, you know, use that in ways that were like we're already equipped to make an impact through our missions.
All of that really makes me think about the comparison with photos. Like, okay, you hear yourself on a recording and you're like, that's not what I sound like. Same thing with photos. Like, people often see a photo of themselves and think that it's not what I look like. Usually it's because they're used to seeing themselves in the mirror rather than seeing photos of themselves, which is a completely different experience. Same thing with what you just explained about listening to your own voice. Like, I can hear myself pretty clearly right now, despite the fact that I'm wearing noise canceling headphones. And I do not sound like what I sound like when I listen to a recording of my voice. But it's really not about, like, being a good singer in Simon Cowell's eyes. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume you're going to be like, yes. It's about using your voice for your own benefit. It's not about sounding a particular way. Like, you could do no vocal training ever and just enjoy the fact that you can sing along with the music in your car and just feel friggin' great about it. Yeah. And, like, with photos, like, it's not about other people liking how you look. Although with photos, usually people are going to be like, but you look great. It's usually just, you know, you don't want to be judged. So you're, like, prejudging yourself so that people aren't going to see what you're doing or hear what you're doing and then judge you. And when you told the running story, I'm, like, going through my mind. I'm like, what is this reminding me of? And I'm thinking and I'm thinking and I'm thinking, and it finally dawned on me. Phoebe from Friends. There was the one episode where she went running with Monica, I think, but she ran like a maniac, like legs and arms flying everywhere. And it was like this big thing where, like, Monica didn't want to run with her ever again because it was so embarrassing. And Phoebe just didn't give a flying fuck. She was like, this is how I run and it's awesome. No, it was Rachel. Because I remember at the end of the episode, Rachel was like, well, I'll give it a go. Ran like a friggin' maniac. And she was like, actually, that was fun. Like, it doesn't matter what the end goal is. Like, I don't think that what you're saying is I'm going to train people so that they can get on stage and sing to an audience, but that they can use their own voice in the way that they want to use their own voice in a way that is beneficial to them. Like Casey sitting in the middle of Starbucks laughing his fucking ass off really loud. Like, fucking good for him. He's enjoying himself. The people sitting at the table across Starbucks staring at him like he's an asshole, they're not enjoying themselves. Casey is enjoying himself. You don't need to worry about what other people think about you if you're enjoying yourself. Why do you care?
Yeah, I mean, that's the primary importance, right? Like, the primary importance for me is to kind of reawaken or revitalize or reconnect with our voice in that holistic way, right? Also, if you want to work on your singing voice, and if you want to sound like a particular singer or like a particular genre or in a particular style, we can work towards that. Like, you and I could get together and choreograph the Single Ladies dance if we really wanted to. Like, we could do that. We could spend a lot of time doing that if we're like, we're gonna make a reel together, it must be that. But, like, I think we both know, like, that'd be very time consuming. And that might not even be as like, why, right? Like, it's like, so, like, part of it is the why, right? Because, like, for you and I, right? Like, let's if we think about dancing, okay, baseline, you and I should dance whenever the fuck we want to have a great time and feel great, because movement is a tool for us to, and I mean, like, it's literally a tool for us to be able to think and perceive differently. Like, embodied cognition opens new possibilities, right? Like, that is like an almost a human right for both of us, right?
Yeah.
Then if we're wanting to dance for a purpose, separately or together, I don't know, I'm vision casting some dancing in our future, I guess. Like, if we're dancing for a purpose, okay, it's to make a reel. Okay, why are we making that reel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we might be, maybe we do want to challenge ourselves and go single ladies style because like we want to really stretch what our perception of ourselves, maybe the perception of the people who view our content. Like maybe there's a reason we do that, right? And that could be a wonderful, expanding, hilarious, great experience, whether we nail it or whether it's a funny thing. But maybe we are better off to totally freestyle it because we're actually trying to express more of what comes naturally to us, right? And, you know, similarly, preparing a song and thinking you want to do it in the way that's most going to impress a judge. Because sometimes, you know, maybe you do enter a competition or an audition. Like, I've helped people prepare for competitions and auditions for sure, right?
Yeah.
And, I mean, even in that context, sometimes it's about, oh, I want to sing exactly like that singer that originally sang the song. But often, if we try it out in some different ways, if we make it more our own, if we explore different options rather than trying to narrow down into getting one really, you know, really tight option, then we can explore a lot of different possibilities. And I imagine for photos, there's some crossover. Like, I imagine if someone's like, I want to look like a victorious statue. It is so important to me that in our shoot, we have at least one shoot where I'm standing up on that rock and I look like a statue. You need to make me look grand and powerful. Like, I'm sure you could help that person with their posing, with the lighting, with like you would make creative choices to achieve that end, right? Like that you could help that person a lot, and like maybe that would be the choice, and maybe there's a reason for that. But also, I have a feeling that if you had that shoot with that person, you'd say something. Well, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing you'd be like, let's try some other things out too. What else can we try? Like, what's more natural? What shows your personality? Like, why are you doing this? What's the energy you want to convey? And actually, I think to me, this really connects with the singing part. Even if their reasons for statue pose were power or confidence or, I mean, even grandeur, right? Like that there might be also other ways of getting to the same ends.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, with photos, it's usually that they want to look like someone else that they've seen at some point in their lives. They're like, this looks good. I want to look like that, which usually doesn't work out too well. It's usually best if you just do you instead of doing what other people are doing. And I was just thinking, I was laughing a minute ago because I really, really love singing any song like a minion, like sounding like a minion, like when I'm singing. I find it so entertaining. Like, I enjoy it. I don't do it around people. I do it just for myself. But it's so entertaining. Same with dance. I dance like a wackadoodle. It's crazy.
Totally. And actually trying on different kinds of like voices like that, like a minion, that is so useful. Like the years I spent avoiding exploring certain parts of my voice because I had frankly either misunderstood instructions or been given instructions that weren't that great about how I should try to sing. Like, and the amount of exploration I could have done if I had gone even more in that direction of trying on weird and wacky things or different kinds of characters and different kinds of sensations rather than thinking, oh, I need to do the right thing, thinking, how can I experience a lot of different things? And it was, you mentioning Friends made me think of Smelly Cat, the song, and how that song, I don't think was ever intended to be, I was going to say pleasant, but, but you know, like it's not that put that song in an audition, like if Friends didn't exist, like put that song, like again, if you didn't know that song, with no context, if you replicated the performance or played the audio of the performance with no context, like you might get some negative feedback on that, right?
Yeah.
But yet, Smelly Cat is iconic, and I have been singing it on and off for years because it'll just pop in my head, and it's hilarious to just launch into a very heartfelt rendition of Smelly Cat, and I have gotten so much out of that song, and like I'm sure that some people may dislike that song and feel it could have been cut from the show, but look at the positive impact that song has had in the world. Yeah. Like, I know I've had fun with that song. So many people, I guarantee you, have done more singing in a day than they would have otherwise because of that song. And I guarantee you there have been hundreds, if not millions of people who have been moved to sing with their family and friends in a chorus of Smelly Cat. And they might have not sung anything otherwise. And I mean, also, some families do sing together. Some friends do sing together. This isn't universal, that this isn't a part of people's lives. It's actually weird in human history for it not to be a bigger part of our life. But I have to say, I am surprised at how often I hear that it's not. And I've been surprised in my own life, even being like, this is my life's work as a professional, you know? Yeah. And it's not all, it was, having my own kids, even having worked in early childhood like music education so much, it wasn't always automatic or easy to bring music into the house. It wasn't always, sometimes it was instinctual or just a fun thing, but sometimes I would think, oh, like I'd feel friction, or I'm just not in a mood for it. And like, it wasn't always as seamless as I imagined, partially I think because of these cultural norms or expectations in not all cultures, not all places, not all families, but in many places and in much of what I've observed in my own work.
So I have a feeling that everyone is going to go and binge watch Friends now, which I'm totally going to do. But like, I think everyone should try to live more like Phoebe, which is her entire character. And like with Smelly Cat and any of her music, like all of it. The rest of the characters in the show are like talking about her singing and talking about how they're not going to tell her that her singing doesn't sound good to them. And you notice that like they have this like moral dilemma, like, let's not tell her that she doesn't sound good, but she's just living her life, not giving a flying fuck. And I would imagine that if they did tell her, she would be like, I don't care. Like her entire character is not doing things the way that people want to see them. She's just doing what she wants. So when I say live more like Phoebe, I mean, just do what you want to do. And I find that when you start doing things more in line with the way that you actually want to do things, then, it becomes a little bit easier. Like, yeah, I don't know. You don't have to start singing like Phoebe, but like sing however you want, and don't care if people don't like it. They don't have to listen.
Yeah. I have to look at that episode again because I'm now like, how does it turn out? I need to, because all I remembered was the song. Yeah. Like, what actually happened there? But I think there's also a point of like, that was her choice to be like, take it or leave it. This is what I'm doing. Like, that's fine. And I think that, like, there's a big spectrum of choices, right? Like, it is totally legit to get your Smelly Cat song that maybe someone has criticized. You can either ignore that feedback and just enjoy yourself. You can make changes, though, right? Like, if you have specific goals around your voice, like, you can unpack that. You can get into that. Like, we can work with that. But you don't have to. And I find so often, instead of it being, I wonder what's going on here. I think I sound great. But then when I listen to the recording, I'm not so sure. Or like, my friends seem a little weird. Like, there's a side of that of like, just don't worry about it. But there's also a side of, so often I hear people say they just shut down because of a performance they were disappointed in, or because someone told them something, or because they disappointed themselves in some cases, or whatever, right? And it becomes like a freeze state, or a fawning state of not wanting to like possibly like incite any negative feedback or any feedback at all, right? Yeah. And it's like, we can get curious about it, and we can get curious. And I say this partially because I'm not saying don't explore singing and singing better, because in exploring singing, what we think of as better, we realize what is better, we see a broader range of choices for singing, and we can really deepen our experience through working towards mastery. But to keep like relating with photography, like yes, people should definitely hire a professional, and they should not stop taking their own photos on the go. Like it's a both and people, I'm sure, could like learn to really improve their own like self photography or candid photography or whatever, right? But that isn't to say they shouldn't bother unless they improve it. Like there's a range of choices.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to record another episode because holy moly.
I was going to say we didn't talk a lot about pivots, but I think we described a lot of what can I guess like examples of what can influence a pivot and what can go into that.
We'll do an episode on pivots. Separate from this one, in addition to this one. Also, like in terms of like mastery, don't like pigeonhole yourself to just like popular music, for example. Like I find if I listen to bagpipes, a traditionally horrible sounding instrument, according to lots of people, or basically any kind of indigenous music, I get like sucked right the fuck in. And it's vastly different from what I would listen to. Like Adele does not sound like bagpipes or anything you would hear at a powwow. But holy damn, do those things have an impact on my physical being when I'm listening to it in a positive way. In no way do I cringe and go, ugh, that sounds bad. And yet I can't do those things with my voice. And I also can't play bagpipes. And I'm just using those as an example, kind of because of Ross from Friends.
I mean, bagpipes were used to frighten the enemy. So they should feel powerful. They should feel intimidating, you know, and that, you know, sometimes we think of trying to achieve perfection, but so much of what helps us enjoy and appreciate voices or music is either literally roughness as a vocal quality, right? Like, well, there's lots of examples of different degrees of that, right? Or pitch variations, things like that. Like sometimes we're trying to get things more and more mechanical and more like quote unquote perfect, but it's actually already perfect the way it is. Like it's actually more impactful if we're not pulling away from the tradition, but rather experiencing what's really in that. On the Infinite Improvisation Podcast, we did an episode with an Indigenous musician and talked quite a bit about this, about the contrast for him between learning classical music growing up and the Indigenous music he was listening to. And it's
cool. I'm gonna have to check that one out. Well, on that note, then, what's the new podcast and when is it coming out? Well, it'll be out by the time this comes out, won't it?
Yeah, you can. By the time you're hearing this, you can check it out. It's called Lauren's Best, and it pairs with my Substack publication. So you can also check out the written and vlog portions of it there. Yeah, and it's all things Lauren, all things Lauren's Best. Meaning, it's a bit of a cheeky title because part of it is what is even doing my best? What is our best? You know, if I'm bringing you the best of what's worked for me, the conversation's always a little more nuanced than that. So it's me diving into what's worked for myself as a creative, but also talking to other creatives about how we got to where we are, what we wish to help the world with, and where we're going, what lights us up.
Excellent. And where can people find you?
You can check out my website, laurenbest.com. I'm at @ByLaurenBest on Instagram. I love to connect there. If you're still listening, please let me know. Like, let me know your thoughts. If you heard me say all the things I've said today, I would love for it to be a two-way conversation. So please don't hesitate to send me a DM or send me an email. I also have a business website, Best Practice Arts, where I have some more about that side of what I do, and lots of links and resources on my website too. So the Canadian New Music Network resource that's in the hub is linked from there, more about the projects I'm working on. And you can find my book wherever you like to get books, audiobooks, and ebooks.
And name your book so people know what they're looking for.
Of course, yeah. My book is called Just Leaves. So Just Leaves by Lauren Best. It's a collection of poetry. There's something for everyone in there. There are it kind of walks through a lot of different kinds of themes. So I'd love to also hear from you if you check out some poems and let me know how they landed too.
Excellent. I almost forgot that I closed the show with a ridiculously happy moment, and which is meant to be just something big or small that has made you happy recently. Do you happen to have anything off the top of your head?
I'm pretty happy lately. Oh man, I'm pretty happy. I think particularly though, noticing my own happiness, but I feel like we need a word for this in English. Like the realization of your own happiness in a multifaceted way, despite the suffering that occurred to this point, being able to look back and while, because there's a little grief sometimes at looking at your past and what could have been, but seeing all that come to the present moment and that making it all the more sweet.
Very nice. I think that mine would have to be that I played ball on Sunday, so a couple days ago. And yes, it's winter. I was playing in a dome. But mostly the fact that yesterday, all of my teammates were posting to the group chat saying, I can't walk, I'm so sore. And I was like, I'm good.
Nice.
I'm not sore anymore. Yeah, I guess so. Stretching works, people. Okay, if you want to have your ridiculously happy moment played on the show, then you can record it at happyp.pl/moment, or you could watch for the social media prompts and just post it, and then I will read it on the show. And I'm Sophia Lemon, and I photograph ridiculously happy people. And you can find me on Instagram at ridiculously happy people, and that is spelled PPL. On Facebook, on Pinterest, and at my website, which is sophialemon.com. And please share, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast in your podcast app of choice. Everything you do helps me make the podcast better and all that fun stuff. And thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.